Hi, my name is Arman Shah, president of KITE, and welcome back to the free Python course by KITE. In the last video, we learned about for loops, and in this video, we're going to continue learning about for loops, and more specifically, look at the patterns we could look at with for loops. So we could actually use for loops to analyze data in a file or list. And I know we don't learn about lists yet, but a list is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It is a list of values, like over here, strings or integers. So this is what a list looks like, and we could actually make a line of code in a for loop to help count the number of items in a list. So I'm going to replicate this type of code in a replit real quick. So let's say we have a list like this, and we're going to say list equals 1, 2, 3, 9, 10, 22, 3, 65, 32. So in that list, let's say we want to find the number of items in that list. So in order to do that, we could simply just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But if we didn't know what the list looked like, how would we do that in Python? So the solution with that would be a for loop. So we could say item in list and then we could say count equals, well, first we have to define count. So we could say count equals 0, because in our code we could have that count starts with 0, and for each item we're going to say count equals the current count plus 1. At the end, print count. So what this will do is that we'll have a list over here with our numbers, and we have our count equal to 0. That means the total number starts with 0. But then, because we have for an item in list, that means it's going to go over each number, each item, each value in the list, and it's going to add 1 to the current count meter. So if we run this, we should get 9. That means there's 9 total items in the list, and if we added a few more, let's just add random numbers, run that, the value would add by 2, 11 now, because we had 2 more items in the list. It's also important to note that we put item over here. The word item is the iteration variable again, and the iteration variable doesn't matter. If we put x instead, it will run the same, but for the sake of simplicity, and so we can understand the code better, we're going to put item. And of course, we'll get the same output. We could also sum loops by using a for loop. So let's say we use the sum now. So we're going to say sum equals 0. And now for item and list, we're going to actually say the sum equals item, which would be the value added plus sum. And we're going to print the sum. So what is this going to do? So we start with 0 as our sum, just as a starter. And then for each time, for each iteration, each loop, we're going to add the item, whatever the value of the list at that time would be, to the sum. So first time, it would be 1 plus 0. That means the sum would be 1. And then we go to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And then eventually, we're actually going to be adding all these numbers up together, and we should get the total sum. So we'll get 192 as the sum. So that's how you find the sum of the this list. So an important thing to consider in Python is, an important thing to keep in mind is that we just found the sum and the count using a for loop. But in the reality, this is kind of unnecessary. We don't have to make a for loop using in order to find the sum and the count using a for loop. We don't have to do all that work because there's already built-in Python function called sum, right? And count, and length, to find the count. And we already went over this. So if we wanted to find the length of this list, we just do length list. We can print that. We could also do sum of the list and print that. So pretty much this is kind of what the for loops have inside the length and the sum. They had the previous lines of code that we just wrote. you wouldn't really use a for loop to find the counts, or the length in this case, and the sum of a list, because you already could, there's already a Python function built in. But it's kind of nice to show you what the functions kind of have inside them. They kind of have for loops inside them. That's how they function. So at the end of the day, we did get the same values for the sum and the counts just by using the Python built-in functions. So we could also find the largest and the smallest value of a list using a for loop. And again, we could just use Python built-in functions like the max and min function to do this. Like the max function will find the maximum value of a list or a string, and so with the min function with the smallest value. But again, we could use this using for loop just for the sake of seeing what's inside of these functions, these built-in functions. So in order to do this, we could, well, first of all, we could see that the maximum function is 65. The maximum value is 65. But in order to code it in the for loop, we could first assign largest to the value none, so it has a none value. And for each item in the list, again, this is the iteration variable, we could go by and we could check if the current largest value, which is none at the moment, is greater or smaller than the current value of the item. So what this does over here, it's a boolean that checks if the value is none, which only happens once, and then it also checks if the item, whatever the value is in the iteration, is greater than the current largest value. So for example, let's say the current largest value would be none. Let's say the largest value is 1, because after the first iteration the largest would be assigned to 1. Then we go to 2. The new largest value would be 2, because the item 2 is greater than the previous large value of 1. So at the end of the day, it's going to have 65 as the largest value. So if we run this, we'll get that the largest value is 65. And we could also do this with the smallest value, simply by, let's change these to smallest. And we could say if it's none, or if item is less than the smallest. Just flip the sign pretty much. And then smallest. So if we run this. Oh, I think I messed something up. There we go. We'll get the smallest value is 1, because that's obvious, right? That's 1. So these are the 2 exercises on iterations that are really good. Exercise 1 is actually really good. I recommend doing that one. Combines a lot of stuff we learned about iterations. And if you have any questions or concerns on the solution to either of these exercises, make sure to check out the Discord. You could ask the questions on there. So thank you for tuning in on this video about iterations. If you have any questions, as I said, check the Discord, and you could ask a tutor on the Python forums. If you're also interested in joining KITE and starting a chapter, also join the Discord. Thank you.